Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome to Everything Cooperative. This is a great Thursday morning, and we have Cathy Statz on the line with us. Good morning, Cathy.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
Well, I'm pretty well, recovering from a cold, so I'm a little bit hoarse, but hopefully my voice will hold out today.
Well, it sounds great right now. So good. Let's go.
Great.
Let's play. All right. Are you the educational director of the Wisconsin Farmers Union? What's the Wisconsin Farmers Union first?
So Wisconsin Farmers Union is what's considered one of the general farm organizations, which means that we focus on, general farm issues, no particular commodity. And as an advocacy organization, we were organized back in 1902 in Texas, actually, by farmers who were interested in bettering their life through advocacy and through cooperatives.
And advocacy is going to the politicians and trying to get policies made that helps farmers?
Right. So Wisconsin Farmers Union and Farmers Union as a national organization frequently uses a triangle to explain kind of the major tenets of the organization's work. And so that equilateral triangle features legislation or civic advocacy on one side, cooperation on the other, and education at the base, indicating that unless you teach folks how to be civically engaged, unless you teach folks how to use the cooperative business model, you can't better your life through this collaborative action.
So we're right now talking about the fifth principle of cooperation, this training, education, information, getting it out to the public.
Absolutely.
Okay. I like it. So the Farmers Union, 1902 in Texas. So is there a farmers union in each state, and then it makes up a national organization?
So the Farmers Union is a grassroots organization. So the state level of organization depends on the engagement in that state. So there are Farmers Union members in every state in the nation. Not every state has an organized state chapter. So anybody who's a member in one of those states that isn't organized would just be an at-large member through the National Farmers Union organization, which as a federated structure is made up of all of those Farmers Union member states.
Okay. All right. So here's this national group. And you have all of these different organizations at different states, and you have somebody from every state that belongs to the national. Wow. Mm-hmm. It's big.
It is big. And it has a great history.
1902 in Texas. So you have a sense of how many farmers are throughout all of these organizations that the National Association represents?
We typically would say at about 200,000 member families. And that's sort of an interesting aspect of the organization, that it's not just an individual person who is a member, but it's actually a family membership. And that grew out of our appreciation and an understanding of family farm agriculture really being, all hands on deck. So one of the things that's sort of distinctive about our organization is that from the earliest days, there was sort of a named primary member on the membership, but the spouse of that person and any children aged 16 to 21 were actually full voting rights privileged members within the organization. So there's actually many more members than the number shows, because each membership represents that whole family and sort of recognizes, the involvement and the voice of the whole family, including those young adults who, back then as now are taking a pretty significant role in the work and decision making on those family farms.
And what was that age range for those children? Or
16 to 21 was the voting age for children within the family. right? So everybody's a member per se. Everybody's counted in terms of participation in our education programs, our camp programs. But actually, once you turn 16 in the organization, you can serve as a delegate to the state, to the national convention, and have a full voice in the organization's work.
And what happens after 21? You have to get your own membership?
Yeah, that's the expectation. We recognize that, through that age, some folks may still be, getting started in college, et cetera, or maybe doing a vocational program. But we would expect that starting at age 21, that they become members, with their own membership.
Wow. I know nothing about this. I've never been on a farm, or I've been on a farm, but not in this family farming thing. We did about what I think would have probably been about an acre when I was growing up with my two brothers and dad. We would, maybe about 6 to 10 years, we would, one of our neighbors would allow us to plant. The only part of farming that I like, Cathy, was the harvesting part. Well, really it was the eating part of the harvest. After that, that's the part I like. Okay. So how did you get involved with Wisconsin Farmers Union?
Well, I grew up in it, actually. I'm a product of the youth and camp program. My parents were invited to join probably in as I recall, the late 70s, early 80s. I grew up on a small dairy farm in the southern part of the state of Wisconsin, just about a half an hour from our state capital of Madison. And so when I was 6, 7 years old, I started attending what are called our day classes or our day camps, which were typically hosted by a farm family in the local community, maybe at a local park, maybe on a farm. And when I was 9, I attended our overnight camp program for the first time. And that really launched a lifelong connection to the organization, which continues today in my present work.
So first grader, you go to a day camp. Okay, 6 years old. So you have regular school, and then in the summer you have some kind of day camp or something that you go to at somebody's farm.
So these were typically just one-day programs periodically throughout the year. So starting in kindergarten, first grade, Farmers Union youth can attend to these activities. They're a little bit like 4-H. I tell folks who maybe have a background with 4-H in the sense that they're typically run by local volunteers. They have often some kind of structure at the county level, but at the county level, it's still all volunteers. And so it's not necessarily an every month kind of gathering, but it might be, 1 or 2 events during the summer, maybe something in the fall, a get-together, perhaps something around the holiday break when schools are off. Some youth groups meet more regularly. Some meet maybe just 3 or 4 times a year. So it wouldn't have been a regular everyday kind of program, but just an opportunity to connect from time to time, to do some activities, to maybe play some games, maybe tour a local co-op, maybe having a guest speaker, maybe volunteer for the County Farmers Union's summer picnic or something along those lines.
Wow. Okay. All right. So at 9, you go to the overnight camp. And is that
right
where Camp Kenwood comes in?
Yes, so that's the name of Wisconsin Farmers Union's camp facility. Camp Kenwood was named after Ken Hones, who was the president at the time that this notion of having our own camp facility was born. Farmers Union had started holding summer camps in the 1930s, actually. The first camps were in Montana and North Dakota. And in Wisconsin, we started in the late 30s using rented facilities. But in the mid-40s, it became the dream of our current president at that time to have a place we could call our own. And so the camp was built with mostly volunteer labor. Local farmers, came and helped clear brush and put up the buildings. And so I started attending those camps when I was 9. A lot of kids came knowing it was kind of their only vacation, their only break from the work of the farm in the summer. But there were also town kids, city kids who came along as well. And so it was a great opportunity for kids from all kinds of backgrounds to come together for just a few days, 4 or 5 days. We couldn't really get away from the farm for any longer than that. There's a lot to be done in the summer. But it was a chance to get away, to build some independence, to build some leadership skills, and, to learn about the issues important to family farms and rural communities and cooperatives.
and cooperative. Well, I'm glad we got that word in since the program is called Everything Co-op to talk about cooperatives.
It's pretty important to us, yeah. Actually, I didn't mention this earlier. The full name of the organization is actually the Farmers Educational and Cooperative Union of America. And we shortened that to Farmers Union years ago, but our legal name still has that education and cooperative component to it.
Farmers Educational and Cooperative?
Mm-hmm. Union of America.
Wow. Yeah, that is a mouthful.
You understand why we use Farmers Union for short.
Yes. Farmers Educational and Cooperative Union of America. And when was it started?
And so the other... Mm-hmm.
Was that the 1902 they started with that name?
Yeah, that's right. That's the earliest version of the organization's name. I mean, there were a number of other farm organizations around that time that some of them came together to form what is now the Farmers Educational Cooperative Union of America. This is part of a long sort of history of, progressive work for farmers to come together and better their situation, better their communities. One of the things that I often want to point out, though, is that while we have an affinity with labor unions, we're not considered a labor union. We're really a service association. And Wisconsin's organization, in fact, happens to be incorporated under Wisconsin's cooperative statute. So we're considered a sort of an education and service cooperative.
Great. I'm just back on this name, Farmers Educational and Cooperative Union of America. I love it. Okay, 1902. So 2 years ago, which would have been 2017, that NCBA CLUSA celebrated 100 years. So that means that they were probably around 1917, 1915 or something when they got started. You guys were 1902. Okay, because I knew nothing about co-ops, Cathy, until I started managing housing co-ops, and then I've fallen in love with this model of what it does for people. So I just keep learning. This program has been on the air now 6 years, and we were only going to do it 1 month, the month of October 6 years ago, and it's just really taken on, and I love it because I keep learning, and just like this history you were telling me about. We're going to take our first break, and I'd like to come back and get more into, I've taught 12 years of my career, so I'm very much into education and how you can start early on with somebody 6 years old or pre-kindergarten learning about cooperation and what are some of the kinds of things that you have learned, and you all make sure that people continue to learn while you are hiking and fishing and swimming and playing co-op games. What are the kinds of tools that you're trying to get people to know? So we're going to take our first break, and we'll be right back. Information is power. Yep, that's why WL makes a great partner for this program, because as we were just talking with Cathy Statz, that the Farmers Educational and Cooperative Union of America, their foundation, their fundamentally is education. Education is giving out information, getting people to understand different kinds of lessons so that they can live a quality life. So that's what we want to get into next. I know that the Farmers Union, or this Farmers Educational Cooperative Union, was started in 1902 in Texas, and it's now a nationwide group. And with education as the foundation, cooperative and legislation are the other two prongs of this organization. And so when she was growing up, she started in pre-kindergarten or kindergarten in the first grade, and then she went to day camp when she got to be 9 years old and stayed overnight, or an overnight camp. So Cathy, what are some of the kinds of things that you all learn? Oh, no, let's start first with what are some of the kinds of things that you do in this overnight camp, and what are the things that you're trying to teach people, or in your case, what you were learning in the beginning?
Sure. So we are considered both an educational and recreational camp. And so that means many of the things you associate with summer camp are there, right? So we're situated on a beautiful lake, so we can go swimming. We are adjoining a state park, which incidentally, a part of that property was originally part of our camp facility. When the state park was established, a portion of that property became part of the state park. So we have a gate into the state park trail system, so we can do a morning hike through the woods, which is beautiful. We have campfires with s'mores and, skips with silly songs and costumes. We have casual sports. We have a lot of those things that folks associate with a summer camp experience. Staying in a cabin, nights out under the stars, at a campfire. One of the things that's distinctive is this cooperative education component. So we have sort of 3 lesson or workshop times during the day. One is always focused on an issue related to the work of Farmers Union, often related to land or water or food issues. One topic is always related to, sort of global issues or personal development. So, for example, those lessons have included everything over the years from renewable energy to fair trade to personal development issues around cyberbullying or, understanding how the Olympics work from a global perspective. I mean, lots of different topics that get kids thinking both internally and externally about their world. But there's always, and this is something that goes back to the earliest days of our camp program, always a lesson on co-ops. And in Wisconsin, we use sort of a 3-year rotation of programming because we recognize that a lot of kids come to camp maybe as early as 8, continue all the way through 18. So there cannot be a static curriculum, right? Because the same kid might come year after year after year. So how do we give them some cooperative basics, but in a new and fresh and interesting and fun way every year? So one year we might focus on the structure of co-ops. That is to say, that co-ops are there for their members. The members elect a board. The board hires a manager. The manager hires the employees, and the employees are there to serve the members. So kind of demonstrating that circular structure of cooperatives, which is a little bit different from the hierarchy of kind of traditional business.
Kathy, wait, I'm going to stop you. Kathy, I got to stop you one second. You said it so clearly. I got that however old you are now, you've been dealing with it a long time. You said it so clear. I mean, I understand the structure and I have that chart and I will also teach from that structure, but I've never heard it so succinctly put in such a short time. Thank you. Okay.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, the basic notion here is that, as I often say, think about the average age of a kid running a lemonade stand. They're not an MBA student, right? They're fairly young kids. And so a lot of these basic concepts can be introduced at a pretty early age, and kids can get it, So whether it's the structure, whether it's the sort of types and sectors, which is something we talked about this past summer. So that is to say, we used kind of a notion of thinking about both the power and the purpose of cooperatives. So the power element was who owns it, right? For what power empowerment is there? Is it for the consumer to save money? Is it for the producer to earn more? Is it for the employee to control more? Is it for small business to be able to do more? Right? So who has the power in that cooperative? And then what is the purpose? What is the sector it occupies? So is it consumers gathering together to purchase groceries? So is it the sort of the grocery and food sector? Is it farmers seeking to market a product through the agricultural sector? Is it everyday working people coming together to gain greater power in the financial sector through a credit union, or to access electricity through a rural electric? So we looked at both of those elements, if you will, of cooperatives, both who holds the power and then for what purpose do those folks empower themselves to get something they couldn't get on their own. So that was this past year's topic. And then another
okay, so I got that, Kathy, before you go to the next one, I got that as power and purpose, P and P, the P square. Yes. What does this look like? Who has the power? Now, I'm not wanting you to repeat that, but I'm going to go back and listen to this power, these 3 things that you talked about for power, or maybe with 4, in terms of who are the stakeholders, if you will.
Right.
What's their reason and what are they trying to do and purpose? Okay, got it. That's beautiful. Keep going.
Yeah.
What's the other?
Sure. And so the final lesson then is, or the third topic rather, I should say, is around cooperatives in the international space. So Farmers Union from its earliest days was very interested not just in raising the quality of life for farmers here, but being in solidarity with farmers and rural people around the world. So Farmers Union and its educational program have always had a nod to global awareness in our programming. Lots of folks know, for example, the term care package, right? That's something you might send to your kid in college, a package of cookies or some warm socks over a cold day. Not everyone knows the origin of CARE, which was an acronym for the Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe. NCBA CLUSA International was a huge part of the origin of CARE, but National Farmers Union was there as well, one of the organizing groups to bring food to the starving people of Europe in the aftermath of World War II. And so as an organization, even in those early days, we were looking at how we could help people around the world, how we could help rebuild agriculture, how we could help folks find access to markets in a way that did not, disadvantage other farmers around the world. And so that international component is really important to us. Back in the 1950s, when I look in the old National Camp yearbooks, I see that they had guests from India and China, and I'm thinking it can't have been easy to travel in those days, and yet it was important to us as an organization to engage with our fellow farmers around the world and bring some of that knowledge and awareness to kids even in the most rural parts of America.
And can you tell me what that CARE stood for? Cooperative? I got cooperative in Europe. Okay.
Yeah, the Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe. Okay. So the name changed over the years as their mission and their work changed, as they grew, beyond just the boundaries of Europe, as they became a nonprofit rather than strictly a cooperative. CARE still exists as an NGO doing work in developing nations around the world, but its origin story was a very basic need to help feed hungry people, and it was, a collaborative effort of cooperatives, of farm organizations, of the faith and labor community. It's a great story, a great history that a lot of folks don't know, and we really want to make sure that young people understand. If they're in college someday and they get a care package, they remember that, hey, there's actually a cooperative story behind this contemporary idea.
That's fascinating. I did not. That's why I love this program so much. I keep learning, and the story you just sitting here telling me about World War II and afterwards, and the role that co-ops played and farmers played in helping to feed Europeans. God, wonderful. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I didn't get a lot of care packages in college. I needed them, but I didn't get a lot of them. It would have been nice. Okay. Do you like what you do?
Do I like what I do?
Mm-hmm.
It's the best job in the world. I mean, I love the aspect of the camp program, especially. That's really what drew me to this position with Farmers Union. Of course, I do a number of other things. I work with our overall organization's education work. I help co-coordinate the college conference on cooperatives with the National Farmers Union and other things. But the initial connection for me was that camp program. It was coming to camp every summer, getting a chance to get off the farm for a few days and meet friends from around the country and, really learn about the larger world. I mean, one of the really fun parts of camp, in addition to the co-op lessons, is the co-op store. And this is something, too, that's been a part of all of our camps going way back to the 1930s that, a lot of
before you go there, I want to know about this co-op store, but I just want to get... I really want to get your answer to, do you like what you do? You started there by saying the things that you're doing. And so the camp program is one of the things, the college conferences, and what else? And the reason that was right there for me to ask, because I get that you love what you do. I get that you don't wake up going, oh, I hate going to work today. I don't think you have that in your space at all. Okay. It's
right.
Like every minute of the day you eat, sleep, drink this, because it sounds like a wonderful job to work with young people, to be outdoors in the summertime, to be planning in the wintertime, to be And so you said camp programs, college conferences, and what else do you do?
So So, the youth program that I mentioned has not only the summer day camp component, but also activities throughout the year. So, interacting with our county volunteers and individual youth who want to volunteer directly with the organization to earn some recognition through our youth program. So, some of those recognitions might include, a scholarship to come to camp for free, an opportunity to go on a co-op sort of field trip to the Twin Cities and Minneapolis, St. Paul every other summer, a chance to go to our national camp, the Farmers Union All States Leadership Camp that National Farmers Union runs. So I'm working with our adult volunteers and youth throughout the year as well.
I want to come back to this when we come off our second break. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Thank you so very much. Okay, everybody, this is Vernon Oakes. The program is Everything Cooperative. And today I'm having the absolute pleasure of talking to Cathy Statz, who's the Educational Director of the Farmers Educational and Cooperative Union of America. For short, is Wisconsin Farmers Union. And Cathy was telling us all about the lessons that are learned, and they're broken down into three categories. Land, water, and food is one, and global and personal is two, and this cooperative space is the third one. In the cooperative space, they talk about the structure of co-ops, the type and sectors, and then the international space, co-ops in the international space. Cathy, I got that you love what you do, and I got why. This is both brain work and physical work, and you work with young people, and it can be a lot of fun. You were talking about that before we took break. Can you keep telling us what you do?
Sure. So throughout the year, in addition to, the planning that happens for the camp program, which begins basically as soon as the previous summer ends, I'm interacting with youth and adult volunteers through our youth program. I'm helping with some of aspects of our state convention. I do a co-op career day for high school students in the southeastern part of the state in collaboration with the Vernon County Cooperative Association. I serve on a couple of boards as well, the Association of Cooperative Educators and the Ralph K. Morris Foundation, which provides scholarships to young people who are interested in opportunities to learn more about cooperatives and agriculture, especially conservation. So there are a lot of great ways to outreach with both folks in the agriculture and cooperative community, but the general public as well. I'm a member of Rotary, and it's been a great gift for me to help educate folks in the business community in my town about what co-ops are and the fact that there are co-ops and credit unions all around them that they didn't necessarily know were united by this common business model.
Okay, so what town are you in? You said you're in the Rotary of your town?
Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin.
Okay. All right. I've been a member of Rotary only a couple years, and I really like it also. Like it a lot. And I saw you were the president of your Rotary Club?
That's right. Currently co-president. It's my second time around. With a small club, everybody takes a turn.
Okay. Well, I don't want to diminish that presidency or co-presidency by everybody take a turn. I heard that, but I remember when women were not even allowed to be in a Rotary. So congratulations for being in and being active and bringing leadership to that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's one of the things that was kind of interesting, when I joined, because, I come from an organization, as I mentioned earlier, where women have had, full voting rights from the earliest days. In fact, in 1905, the chapter president of one of the locals in Kansas was a woman. 1905. I just think that's a tremendous testament to the kind of organization the Farmers Union is and the ways in which we've been, looking at, youth engagement, women's engagement from the very beginning.
That is wonderful. I got you love what you do. Okay. And I hear your enthusiasm. It comes through the microphone. I'm assuming everybody out there hear it. And when you talk about the program and what people are learning, it's like, why couldn't everybody get this kind of camp? Well, I would have loved to have it as a young person. I did go to a camp Brocious in Wisconsin. Go up to, I'm going to tell you where it is in a minute here. Okay. So we've got what you're doing. We got this sort of sense of the kinds of things that you are teaching. What is a college conference, though? What is that?
Oh, so the College Conference on Cooperatives is really a great opportunity for students to come from all over the country for a kind of a Co-ops 101 weekend in Minneapolis-St. Paul, which is really just such a great center for cooperative activity. So this program actually got its start in a way through William Nelson, the former president of the CHS Foundation and former board member of NCBA CLUSA. He was an ag teacher wanting to introduce his students to the cooperative business model. And by collaborating with the Minnesota Farmers Union, was able to bring a busload of kids up to tour co-ops in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul. And years later, that evolved into what is now a 3-day weekend. Great support from the CHS Foundation, CoBank, Farmers Union, and the whole cooperative community of the Upper Midwest, really, to bring anywhere from 80 to 100 college students, mostly from ag backgrounds, so not all, to learn a little bit more about the co-op business model, to get a chance to get out in the city and visit some of those co-ops, and then to think about sort of where that might lead for them. So are they interested in a ag co-op career? Does the idea of international co-op development speak to them? Are they interested in maybe being a board member someday or starting their own co-op? While we don't get into the nuts and bolts of co-op development so much, it really provides a nice introduction to cooperatives across the spectrum. And I think that's important with the majority of the attendees coming from rural spaces. They may have a fairly narrow notion of what it is to be a co-op, right? They might know the ag co-op, maybe the rural electric, but they've probably never visited a senior housing co-op or been in a natural foods co-op or recognized that credit unions are a financial co-op or had a chance to be inside a flagship location for REI, Recreational Equipment Incorporated, the country's largest consumer co-op, which has a very nice retail location in Bloomington. So we take them out
now
to
in
the
DC
co-op.
too. They have a flagship in DC.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Their newest flagship store. Yeah. So that's really quite eye-opening for these students to recognize that this model is applicable in so many different parts of the economy. And one of the things that I hope they take away is a recognition that, number one, co-ops are a great way for you to do business as a farmer. It's a great way to build leadership if you serve on a board. It could be a fantastic career. It might also fill a gap in your rural community now or in the future, right? If the mom and pop grocery store goes out of business, did you know that the community could, buy it and run it as a co-op? If you're looking for some way to solve, some other rural concern, there might be a cooperative solution. So while they're seeing these co-ops in a fairly large and urban context, we really want to make sure that they understand that the model is flexible and can be applied in a lot of different ways. And some of the strongest examples today, grew out of just a few farmers sitting around the kitchen table figuring out how to solve a problem.
Figuring out how to solve a problem. Matter of fact, the first month we were on the air, a guy from Senegal, Papa Sen, said that co-ops are formed to solve community problems. And he further said, if there's no community problem, then there's no need for a co-op. Okay. So, of course, I remember that when that was like, bang. But for those out there that don't know what Cathy has been talking about in these different sectors, let me give you a quick definition here. So co-ops depends on who owns and controls the business of what type of business it is, what type of co-op it is. If the co-op is owned and controlled by the people that work in that business, the employees, it's called a worker co-op. Therefore, any type of business you can think of could be owned and controlled by the workers. If it's owned and controlled by the people that uses the products or services, then it's called a consumer co-op. And Cathy just mentioned that. And consumer co-ops and ones that we may not know are co-ops is credit unions, is owned and controlled by the people that make the deposits and write the checks. Housing co-ops. In Madison, there is a health clinic that's owned by the patients. It's a patient-centric co-op. Then if it's the farmers have been using this, and that's why farmers know more and the Department of Ag know more about co-ops than anybody else in the federal government. But the farmers would create a business to help them to buy what they needed, a purchasing co-op. So a bunch of farmers would get together. They would form this business, and the people in that business would become experts in buying seed or fertilizer or gasoline or diesel or equipment or whatever these farmers needed. So they had a group of people working for them, and they got a more quality, better price normally for what they needed to produce whatever they're going to produce. So the farmer then produce whatever they're going to produce, and they say, wow, why don't we start a co-op on the other end? And they call a marketing co-op. So they would send the dairy farmer, Cathy on her farm, or parents could have maybe sent their milk to Cabot Creamery or Organic Valley or some other co-op that would market their milk, or they may, what sometimes call a producer co-op, that may add value to it and make cottage cheese or yogurt or something, and then they would sell it to markets that in Wisconsin they may sell it to Florida or California, where their little farm could not reach these markets. So those are four basics, and these marketing co-ops, artists are beginning to use them. There's a co-op in Pittsburgh, Cathy, that's a group of black women artists pull themselves together, and they make jewelry and wood carvings and paintings and clothing, and they have a storefront where each individual artist couldn't do that storefront, but by working together, they have a storefront and they sell their goods through that. So this co-op works in all kinds of different ways, in all kinds of different industries, and matter of fact, all of them, I think. So that's just a quick background of what I've learned in these 6 years of the different types of sectors. Okay.
Wonderful.
That nail it? Did I say that?
Yeah, that's a great summary.
Okay. Yeah, working together here. Okay, you'd be good at this radio program. You should start your own up there in Wisconsin, too. You'd be really good at this. Okay, so you have a career day. So talk to me about what that career day is all about. And you mentioned careers in farming, but as I just mentioned, you have careers in every industry and every type, in urban and rural areas, and this co-op is for all areas. Okay.
Right. Absolutely. So the co-op career day that we coordinate with the Vernon County Cooperative Association, which, by the way, Vernon County in southwestern Wisconsin is just such a really rich area for cooperatives, is a chance for all of the cooperative and credit union representatives in that local area to come together and share with high school students about their co-ops, and about the career opportunities therein. So this is just a one-day program, but it's a great way for the young people in the community to see. Typically, it's high school, sophomores and juniors who are looking at their next steps. And it's a chance for them to learn about some of the great career opportunities in the local cooperatives, but also a chance to learn about the cooperatives themselves and to see the ways in which they're connected and to teach them a little bit about this cooperative business model. And once again, they're frequently surprised to learn about the similarities between these, very different sectors in some cases. But to see that there is this common ground of, people coming together every day, working people coming together to get some product or service or access to market that they couldn't do otherwise alone. And that's really exciting for them, I think, to see, again, that there are great jobs in their own community. There are also great opportunities in cooperatives, at a national level. So, sort of the sky's the limit as far as where they can go and how they can move, between co-ops as well across sector, which is something I think we don't think about very often. But there are a number of folks who maybe start in sort of one area of co-ops but move to another, changing their, industry area, but keeping that cooperative piece consistent. And I think that's a really interesting thing that cooperatives allow.
That is very, very interesting. And I've seen people do that. On this program, I met people who have done this. We're going to take our final break here, but I checked on our webpage. Is www.everything.coop is our webpage. And I went down and I put in CHS. You mentioned William Nelson, and he was on the program, I think in 2015. In 2015, he became a member of the Hall of Fame, the Cooperative Hall of Fame. And so when you were telling the story a bit, I said, yeah, I remember that. So I just went online and he was on the program, and I've gotten a chance to meet and talk to him a couple of times. He's a great human being. Okay. So we're going to take our next break, and I would like for you to think about, Cathy, particularly when we get to the last minute or two, what you want to leave people with. What kinds of messages would you want to leave people with to know about co-ops, and maybe how they can get involved or start one or whatever you want to say. But we'll take our next break, and we'll be right back. Kathy. The program is Everything Cooperative, and my name is Vernon Oakes, your host, who has a great pleasure of talking to Cathy Statz, who's the educational director of the Wisconsin Farmers Union Cooperative, who loves what she does, and she's been involved with this since she was pre-kindergarten or kindergarten into this program, and their camp programs and youth programs, college conferences, career days. They're doing it up there in that part of the world up in Wisconsin. Okay, Cathy, I know you said that women had full voting rights ever since the beginning in this cooperative movement, in particular with the farmers. And they have it that when you become, I think you said 16 to 21 years old, if you're in a family farm, you get a chance to vote. So young and so forth. But Cathy, I'm African American, and I found out that co-ops have also mirrored the politics and, if you will, racism of America. And so I'm wondering in this farm union, did you have African Americans? Because I've talked to the Federation of Southern Co-ops. Cornelius Blanding is now the executive director of that, and they particular black farmers have formed this co-op in 13 southern states. But did you see this mixture of blacks and whites in this farming, or did that racism or separation play out in the farmers union?
That's a great question. And one of the things I discovered when I was researching our summer camp program was that, give me just a moment to kind of give you a little background here.
Okay.
Each summer camp runs a camp co-op store at which the kids can elect a board, they buy a share, they become a member, they earn a dividend. At least in Wisconsin, we do, where the kids actually earn a dividend, and at the end of the camp, any remaining profit gets donated to an external charity or invested back into the camp. So I need to provide that little bit of context for you.
Well, I wanted to get that because you mentioned co-op store before, and so I'm glad you went back there. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so just to kind of that's the sort of the briefest update on that. But that is by way of sharing with you that I discovered when I was looking at some archives with another Farmers Union sort of informal historian, Tom Giesel, in Kansas. He had come across a newsletter that in 1940, the National Farmers Union Summer Camp, the All States Camp, was voting on where to donate these remaining funds, this extra surplus left over after the kids had finished out, their camp's co-op store for the week. And those campers, who now remember are mostly upper Midwestern, small town farm kids from mostly Montana, North and South Dakota, Wisconsin, Minnesota, voted for their camp co-op surplus funds to go to the Legal Defense Fund of Clinton Clark, a black organizer of the Louisiana Farmers Union who had been imprisoned on false charges. So, yes, in the early days, the Farmers Union was very active in the southeastern part of the U.S., very inclusive, as I understand. Did not eventually maintain its success because there was so much pushback to that openness and that inclusion. So, that's my understanding of that history, is that definitely the farmers unions were organizing in those areas. In fact, there was a farmers union funeral home in Alabama, and that they were initially very successful, very robust, and then over time had difficulty sustaining because the organization was explicitly inclusive, and that wasn't very popular.
Explicitly inclusive, so that's sort of what I know. Who was included and who was not included? Explicitly included. Because we were inclusive, it was difficult to maintain the organization sort of politically and culturally in that space. I got it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, but who was this Clark person that they wanted to donate the money for his legal defense fund? What was that? Yeah,
Clinton Clark, as I understand, was the organizer, one of the organizers for the Louisiana Farmers Union. And there's a book about him called Remember My Sacrifice. In July of 1940, he was arrested at a parish-wide rally. He was trying to get over 800 black farmers and workers together, and eventually, worked with the larger Louisiana Farmers Union movement to get the Louisiana Farmers Union going. So I don't know all the details of his story, but there's a connection there historically, a recognition of our solidarity with all farmers. in those days. And I just thought that was kind of a powerful story that, a bunch of kind of upper Midwestern farm kids were had learned about it, first of all, from someone within the Farmers Union organization, and then took the step, because this is something that they vote on at the end of every camp, that they voted that these funds, which could have gone to anything, were to go to the legal defense fund of this falsely imprisoned Black Farmers Union organizer in Louisiana.
Wow, that is in 1940, so that's pre-World War II. 1940. Okay, right. That's in the height of Jim Crow and all of that stuff. Okay, so in these 13 states that the Federation of Southern Co-ops, I don't know if there's 900 or 9,000 farmers that belong to this, and they talk about how much land Black farmers had in 1900 and how much they have today, and it's some huge, 30 million acres of land back then and only 3 million acres of land now. It's some huge sort of disparity of numbers and how Black farmers lost their land. And sometimes it was in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, Black farmers leaving their land in the South and going north to get work. So there is this rich history. Now, have you read Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nimhard's book, Collective Carriage?
I have it, and I know pieces of it, but I haven't read the whole thing yet.
Well, I haven't either. It's a bunch. Okay. But I like what I've read. I assume because you're a member of ACE that you may know her through that organization. I do, yes. And she's been on the show 3 or 4 times, and just a phenomenal human being with a great history. And she told me that or she told the audience that when she started this book, which would be now about 20 years ago, that she was told that Blacks were not into co-ops. And she kept doing research, and it was 15 years before she produced a book. And she just found a phenomenal amount of research where Blacks were involved in farming. And I want to go back and look. I'm going to try to make a note to go look up Clinton Clark to see if she's written. I kind of think she would have captured him in the book. I don't remember it. So, yeah, she's just a great human being with a great history in Blacks and co-ops. All of the main historical figures in the history, I don't know about all, but all that I know are in that book because they were for cooperation, whether it's W.E.B. Du Bois or Frederick Douglass or just loads and loads and loads of people for co-ops in our Black experience.
Such an untold story. It's very powerful.
It is powerful. And Jesse Jackson, he helped to start the Federation of Southern Co-ops. It's just a tremendous history, but it's just not known. And even in the co-op experience, people don't talk about co-ops. Do you have any idea why that is? I mean, they don't get out there and put this banner because it's just such great work.
Yeah, I know. It's a great mystery, because it's really such a powerful story, to tell the overall cooperative story. And I remember I was looking at in preparation for this call, I was looking at James Peter Bass's Cooperative Democracy book. And he wrote, and this is in 1936, why haven't cooperatives become, sort of known and celebrated by all? And he said, really, lack of information concerning cooperation is the first of a twofold answer. And then the fact that its principles are opposed to privilege is the second answer. He said cooperation has working against it ignorance and selfishness.
Principles opposed to privilege.
The principles are opposed to privilege. That notion of equity, equality and equity. Equality of voice and equity of benefit. That notion that one member, one vote, but that your reward or your share of the profit or surplus is dependent on your engagement with the co-op. That equity side. That for some reason those are really hard for folks who have been raised in kind of a traditional economic structure to understand, and so we have those things kind of working against us. And that's why the education piece is so important, and so important to start young. And there's a long ago slogan within Farmers Union that said, "Education is health insurance for cooperatives."
Wow. Okay.
And that that idea that you can't just kind of count on folks, hearing about it and deciding it's a good idea. You actually have to intentionally teach about it and start as young as possible, which is why our camp program does that and our youth program does that. Everything else gets marketed, to kids practically in the womb nowadays. And so we really need to not sort of set aside cooperatives as some kind of thing to understand when you're, studying forms of business or studying economic structures. It's like, no, it's a way of engaging with people and the economy in a way that's that's just, that is inclusive, that builds leadership. It builds individual leadership as well as collective leadership. And you really have to start that as early as possible, because the associational or philosophical side of it, doesn't come naturally if folks are taught that business is just about extracting profit, and increasing shareholder value.
Agreed. Okay, so you just you don't know this, but you've just helped me, and you've gotten me out of the Roberta McDonald's doghouse. Roberta McDonald is the vice president of marketing, and when she was on the program, I told her I think the reason it is because the 1%ers don't want people to know about it. They just and they go about trying to figure out ways of making sure that people don't know about it. And she said I was sinister, but I think this principles over privilege. But I also think the people that are privileged really don't want everyday people to know about it, because it's a way that we can really get wealth. We can get people to get wealth, and people can learn how to run a business and make informed decisions without an MBA. And I got one, and I've never learned about co-ops and that. So, but thank you. You didn't know you were just helping me a lot. Okay.
It's a pleasure.
Last minute, what would you like to leave people with? Oh, we don't have a minute.
Well, I'd just like to say, sure. The cooperative model is so flexible and so interesting, and I really think the time is now for introducing it to the next generation.
I do too. Thank you so very much. Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. Everybody out there, we'll see you next Thursday. Please live cooperatively.